Inside ADX Florence, the 13 systems that control daily life. They had 7 minutes to respond. No alarms were sounding. No doors were breached. But something inside the Supermax had already gone wrong. Stay with this story. What happens next almost didn't get stopped. At 5:42 a.m., the lights in Unit D came on as scheduled. Precise to the second. Inside cell 214, the man did not move. That alone was unusual. In this prison, movement was routine. Even stillness followed patterns. Inmates stood when the lights came on. They stepped back from the door. They waited for instructions. Cell 214 stayed silent. Officer Daniel Reeves noticed it from the control panel. He had been working Supermax units for 9 years, long enough to recognize when silence meant compliance and when it meant something else. This silence was different. Reeves zoomed the camera feed. The inmate sat on the concrete stool, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the far wall. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't defiant. He looked ready. Ready for what Reeves couldn't say. He logged the anomaly the same way he always did. Cell number. Behavior. No response to light cycle. The system accepted the note without comment. Supermax prisons were built on systems. Systems decided when you woke, when you ate, when you showered, when you spoke, if you were allowed to speak at all. The assumption was simple. If the system worked, nothing unexpected could happen. But Reeves had learned something the manuals didn't teach. Unexpected things didn't arrive loudly. They arrived quietly after patterns shifted just enough to be ignored. At 6:10 a.m., meal trays began moving down the corridor. Metal on metal. Wheels humming. The sound echoed through concrete designed to swallow it. Cell doors did not open. They never did. Trays slid through narrow slots, sealed, counted, tracked. Every calorie, every utensil, every second was accounted for. Cell 214's tray went in. It did not come back out. That was the second deviation. Protocol required the tray to be returned within a fixed window. Inmates had no reason to keep it longer. The food was standardized, unremarkable, designed for nutrition, not comfort. Holding on to it served no purpose. Unless purpose had changed. Reeves flagged the delay and requested a routine check. Not urgent, not critical, just enough to acknowledge the irregularity. The response came back quickly. Unit operating within normal parameters. Reeves leaned back in his chair. He had seen this before. Not this exact behavior, but the response. Systems didn't like ambiguity. They resolved it by ignoring it. By 7 a.m., the inmate in cell 214 still hadn't moved. Other cells showed normal behavior. Minimal pacing. Occasional stretches. Eyes tracking cameras without looking directly into them. The unspoken language of men who knew they were always being watched. Cell 214 remained unchanged. Reeves pulled up the inmate's profile. Transferred in 18 months earlier. No recent disciplinary actions. No outbursts. No threats. Psychological evaluations marked him as compliant but reserved. The kind of inmate who disappeared into routine. The kind administrators liked. Reeves scrolled further. Something caught his attention. The inmate had requested 3 schedule clarifications over the past 2 weeks. All routine questions. All answered with form responses. None escalated. Why ask about schedules in a place where schedules never changed? Reeves added another note to the log. Repeated inquiries regarding daily operations. Again, the system accepted it. At 8:15 a.m., the inmate finally moved. Slowly, deliberately. He stood, lifted the tray, placed it on the floor, directly beneath the camera's blind angle. A narrow strip the designers had deemed inconsequential decades earlier. Reeves felt his jaw tighten. Blind spots weren't supposed to matter. They were too small, too controlled, too insignificant to exploit. Unless someone had been watching long enough. Reeves rewound the footage. Then he rewound further. Days passed in seconds on the screen. He saw it clearly now. The inmate's movements aligned with maintenance shifts, with camera recalibrations, with lighting cycles, with moments when attention was elsewhere. Not random, studied, Reeves submitted a priority note. Not an alert. Not a lockdown request. Just a recommendation. Pattern recognition suggests intentional behavior. Request supervisory review. The reply took longer this time. When it arrived, it was brief. Continue monitoring. By midday, cell 214 had returned the tray. No disturbance. No mess. No indication of distress. If Reeves hadn't been watching closely, the day would have looked perfectly normal. That's how Supermax prisons maintained control, by turning abnormal into invisible. But Reeves couldn't shake the feeling that something had already slipped past them. At 14:30, a maintenance request appeared on his screen. Routine inspection of ventilation ducts in Unit D, scheduled for the following week. Reeves stared at it longer than necessary. Ventilation inspections weren't common. The ducts were sealed, reinforced, outdated but rarely accessed. They were considered low-risk, legacy infrastructure. Reeves pulled up architectural schematics. Old ones. Scanned copies. Hard to read. One duct intersected near cell 214. A duct that had never been fully reinforced during renovations. Reeves cross-referenced the timing. The inmate schedule inquiries began shortly after a routine inspection notice had been posted in the unit. Coincidence, the system would say. Experience told Reeves otherwise. He stood up and walked to the glass, looking out over the silent corridor. Doors lined the walls like sealed vaults. Each one contained a life reduced to routine. Control here wasn't enforced through force. It was enforced through predictability. And someone inside cell 214 had learned how to read it. At 1600 hours, Reeves requested a manual review of camera coverage. That request was denied. Staffing shortages. Priority protocols. No immediate threat identified. Reeves sat back down. He felt the familiar frustration of someone watching a slow-motion failure unfold, not because no one cared, but because no one believed it mattered yet. As his shift neared its end, Reeves reviewed the logs one last time. Then he saw it. A time-stamped discrepancy. 3 seconds missing from the camera feed during the morning cycle. Not a glitch. A manual recalibration gap. Logged automatically. Buried deep. 3 seconds. In a place where every second was measured. Reeves highlighted the entry and froze. Because those 3 seconds aligned perfectly with the moment the tray disappeared beneath the blind spot. He pulled up the maintenance schedule again. Then the inmates' inquiries. Then the schematics. The pattern was undeniable now. Reeves initiated a supervisor override request. His finger hovered over the key. Before he could submit it, a notification appeared on his screen. Cell 214, routine headcount discrepancy. His breath caught. Headcounts didn't fail in Supermax. They didn't drift. They didn't misalign. Unless something fundamental had already changed. Reeves opened the live feed. The camera showed the cell clearly. The stool. The desk. The return tray. But the man was standing slightly closer to the wall than before. Too close. Reeves magnified the image. The concrete behind the inmate looked different. Not broken. Not damaged. Just disturbed enough to matter. Reeves whispered to himself, unheard by anyone. No. He opened the archived maintenance footage. And when he checked the logs from the previous week, the ones no one ever reviewed twice, everything changed. The supervisor reviewed the footage and shrugged. Nothing was broken. Nothing was missing. Nothing justified escalation. That was the mistake. In a Supermax facility, escalation meant paperwork, manpower, and accountability. It meant admitting that a system designed to eliminate uncertainty might have overlooked something small, and small things were supposed to be impossible here. So the decision was made quietly. Monitor. Do not intervene. Officer Reeves was informed after the fact. He reread the message twice, hoping he had misunderstood it. The headcount discrepancy had been reclassified as a temporary visual misalignment. The disturbed concrete was logged as surface wear. The missing seconds on the camera feed were attributed to routine recalibration. Individually, each explanation made sense. Together, they erased the pattern. Reeves stayed on shift longer than required that night. He watched cell 214 through feeds that showed everything except what mattered most. The inmate resumed routine behavior. He stood when lights came on. He accepted meals. He returned trays on time. To the system, the anomaly had corrected itself. To Reeves, it felt rehearsed. 2 days later, the inmate submitted another request. Not about schedules this time. It was a grievance form, polite, carefully worded. He requested clarification on the temperature fluctuation in his cell during overnight hours. Temperature. Reeves felt a familiar tension in his chest. Temperature changes in Supermax weren't trivial. They were tightly regulated, especially in isolation units. Any fluctuation meant airflow adjustments. Ventilation. Reeves flagged the grievance for review. The response came back within the hour. Issue noted. No action required. Maintenance logs showed no recorded changes. That was the second mistake. The third came quietly, the way most serious ones did, disguised as efficiency. Due to staffing constraints, Unit D's maintenance inspection was moved up by 48 hours. Not expanded. Not intensified. Just rescheduled. The crew arrived early in the morning. 2 technicians. Clipboards. Flashlights. They did not open cells. They never did. They checked external vents, pressure gauges, airflow readings. Everything registered within acceptable ranges. They signed off. Reeves watched them leave on the corridor camera. He noticed something the technicians didn't. The inmate in cell 214 stood during the entire inspection. Still alert, watching the door, not the crew. As if he already knew what they would and wouldn't check. That night, Reeves pulled archived footage again. He began mapping the inmates' movements against maintenance cycles. Not just recent ones, historical ones. The pattern extended back months. Every time airflow readings were logged. Every time lighting maintenance occurred. Every time a recalibration window created a microgap in observation. The inmate adjusted his routine by seconds. Not minutes. Seconds. No one trained him to do that. He had learned by watching. Reeves submitted a second escalation request. This time, he attached comparative timestamps and schematics. He didn't label it urgent. He labeled it systemic. The request sat unanswered. The following morning, something subtle changed. Cell 214 store sensor reported normal status. The camera feed showed the inmate seated. But the meal tray did not register its weight when it passed through the slot. That was impossible. Trays were weighed automatically to detect contraband or tampering. A variance triggered an alert. This one didn't. Reeves manually pulled the data. The tray's barcode had been scanned. The weight matched the expected value, but the visual feed showed the inmate's hands empty. Reeves leaned closer to the screen. The inmate had already eaten. Before the scan. That meant the tray had entered the cell earlier than logged. That meant the slot had been opened without triggering the system. Reeves felt the room narrow around him. He called his supervisor directly. This time, he didn't suggest. He stated, "We've lost sync between physical events and system records." There was a pause on the line. Then the response everyone in secure facilities feared, not because it meant danger, but because it meant delay. Let's not jump to conclusions. By afternoon, Reeves was reassigned to another unit. Temporary. Administrative. His access to Unit D feeds was restricted. Officially, it was workload balancing. Unofficially, it was containment. Without Reeves watching, the system relaxed. And the inmate adjusted again. That evening, the camera feed showed him lying on the bunk during count. Face visible. Body still. Count cleared. What the camera didn't show was the depth of the shadow near the wall. The ventilation duct behind it had shifted by less than an inch. Enough. At 2:13 a.m., a maintenance alert triggered briefly. Pressure imbalance. Auto-corrected in under 5 seconds. No one responded. By the time the morning shift arrived, cell 214 looked normal. The inmate sat at the desk. The tray was returned. The wall appeared intact. Head count passed. But when supervisors finally authorized a manual inspection, driven more by accumulated paperwork than concern, they found something no report had captured. The duct cover wasn't loose. It had been removed and reseated. Cleanly. Deliberately. Without tools. That was when the mistake became undeniable. The system had assumed control meant force. But control, it turned out, could be studied. And someone inside the most controlled prison in the country had been patient enough to do exactly that. By the time the alert reached upper administration, it was already too late to ask the most important question. Not how the inmate learned the system, but how long he had been ahead of it. The lockdown order came without explanation. Doors sealed, movement frozen, every unit reduced to silence. When the inspection team finally entered cell 214, they expected resistance. A refusal, maybe panic. They found none. The cell was empty, not escaped, not breached, empty. The bed was made. The desk was clear. The tray sat where it always had. There were no broken locks, no alarms, no damaged concrete. For 6 minutes, no one spoke. In a facility designed so that movement required authorization at every step, an inmate had vanished without triggering a single critical alert. The first assumption was a system failure. The second was human error. The third, the one no one wanted to voice, was that the system had worked exactly as designed, just not in the way they believed. A full forensic audit began immediately. Every camera feed, every sensor log, every maintenance report from the past year. What they discovered wasn't a gap. It was a rhythm. The inmate hadn't broken rules. He had lived inside them. Investigators mapped his daily routine frame by frame. He woke when lights activated. He stood during count. He accepted meals. He exercised in place. But beneath the routine was something invisible. Micro-adjustments. A half step closer to the wall during airflow changes. A pause during lighting transitions. Stillness during recalibration windows. He wasn't testing the system. He was learning it. The ventilation duct wasn't an escape route. It was a blind spot. Not large enough to crawl through. Not loose enough to be obvious. But flexible enough to conceal movement during specific pressure shifts. The inmate had discovered that during scheduled recalibrations, the system prioritized internal balance over external monitoring. For seconds at a time, cameras compensated. Sensors trusted predicted data. In those seconds, motion could exist without being recorded. Not fast motion. Not chaotic motion. Slow. Controlled. Patient. The inmate didn't force the duct open. He disassembled it. By hand. Over weeks. Using nothing but pressure, leverage, and time. Each adjustment small enough to reset without detection. Each movement planned around routine. By the time the system noticed something was off, the changes had already been normalized. The most unsettling part came next. The inmate hadn't escaped the facility. He had moved within it. A secondary service corridor, sealed decades earlier, left intact but unmonitored, connected 2 ventilation zones. It wasn't in the active blueprint. It existed only in archived construction plans. Plans no one referenced anymore. The inmate had. How he accessed them was never fully explained. Some believed he overheard maintenance staff. Others suspected fragments of diagrams embedded in institutional manuals. No proof ever surfaced. What did surface was the final timestamp. At 2:13 a.m., during the pressure imbalance alert, the inmate left his cell. Not running. Not hiding. Walking. By the time staff noticed the discrepancy, he had already moved into a zone the system no longer recognized as occupied. When officers finally found him, he wasn't in a tunnel or a crawl space. He was in an unused observation room. Seated. Waiting. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He simply stood when ordered and complied with every command that followed. Later, during debrief, he answered one question. He looked at the investigator and said, because it was safer to prove it than to wait for it to fail on its own. That statement reframed everything. This wasn't an escape attempt. It was a demonstration. The inmate was transferred the same day. Not punished, relocated. Quietly. The ventilation system was rebuilt. Schedules randomized. Blind spots eliminated. Official reports labeled the incident a procedural anomaly. Unofficially, it became a case study, not in how prisoners break systems, but in how systems teach prisoners what they need to know. The inmate never attempted it again. But the changes remained. Because the truth wasn't that Supermax security could be beaten. It was that absolute control creates patterns. And patterns can be learned. The final audit concluded with a single line that never appeared in public summaries. The system functioned as designed. The assumptions behind it did not. This could happen again. The facility returned to routine within 48 hours. Counts resumed. Meals followed schedule. Doors opened and closed on time. On the surface, nothing had changed. But beneath that rhythm, something irreversible had occurred. A quiet directive moved through federal channels within days of the incident. It didn't carry urgency language or red flags. It wasn't marked confidential. It was framed as a procedural refinement. Facilities across the country were instructed to review legacy blueprints, inactive service corridors, and ventilation redundancies built before modern monitoring standards. Most wardens skimmed the memo. A few took it seriously. Those who did found the same thing. Spaces that were no longer used but never fully erased. Rooms without assignments. Corridors without cameras. Systems designed for a different era, still breathing quietly inside modern prisons. The inmate from cell 214 was never mentioned by name. He became a variable. A lesson without attribution. At the new facility, his conditions were stricter, but not harsher. Movement was reduced. Observation increased. Yet reports noted something unexpected. He stopped adapting. He followed routine without adjustment. No micro-movements. No pattern shifts. No curiosity. Psychological evaluations recorded the same phrase repeatedly. Subject no longer appears interested in the system. That concerned some staff more than the incident itself, because interest had been the warning sign. Internally, investigators debated whether the inmate had planned to escape at all. The evidence suggested otherwise. He hadn't prepared for life outside. He hadn't tested perimeter security. He hadn't attempted concealment once discovered. Everything pointed to intent, but not freedom. One internal memo posed a question that never received an official answer. What if the inmate didn't want out? What if the goal was simply to demonstrate that even the most controlled environment could be navigated by someone with enough time and patience? If so, the implications were larger than any single prison. Supermax facilities are built on certainty that every variable is known, every movement anticipated, every risk eliminated through isolation and repetition. But repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates opportunity. The incident was quietly removed from training materials meant for public release. It remained, however, in closed-door briefings and policy discussions. Engineers redesigned airflow systems. Camera algorithms were updated to flag absence, not just movement. Maintenance schedules were randomized, disrupting predictability. These changes improved security. They also introduced instability. Inmates reported increased stress. Officers reported difficulty maintaining rhythm. What had once been a controlled environment now required constant recalibration. Control had become effort. Years later, a senior analyst reviewing archived incident reports flagged the case again. Not for what happened, but for what didn't. There were no injuries, no damage, no escape, just proof. The analyst wrote a final note in the margin of the report. Containment is not the same as understanding. That note never reached policy level, but it circulated among those who read deeply enough. Today, the inmate remains incarcerated, his location undisclosed, his name absent from public records tied to the incident. But the systems he exposed still exist. They always will, because no system can erase its own history entirely. And no environment, no matter how controlled, can remove the human ability to observe, adapt, and wait. The incident is officially closed. The lesson is not. If this story unsettled you, the next one will be worse.